Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bex Khalil, the Executive Director of United and Homelessness here with Orange County United Way, and I want to welcome you to our July, we just made it in time, community chat. Every month we host one of these online events where I have the privilege of bringing either a local or a national expert on homelessness onto our Zoom webinar and get to ask them a bunch of questions and hope to have a really informative conversation that will be beneficial for us and those of us who are a part of the work to end homelessness here in Orange County, Southern California. So really excited today to have a follow-up to our last community chat where we talked about the 2024 point in time count. For anybody who joined in, you will know that Doug and I had a really robust discussion looking at the data, talking about what it can tell us, what it can't tell us, what are the questions that it prompted. And that is available on our YouTube channel for anybody who might have missed it. We had lots more to talk about, and so I'm really excited today to have Doug Becht back joining us. He is the Director of the Office of Care Coordination with the County of Orange. And today I'm really thrilled to introduce you to Tim Shaw, who is the Chair of the Continuum of Care Board here in Orange County. So Tim is joining us today. Tim, Doug, if you want to just take a moment to introduce yourselves to everybody before we jump in, that would be fabulous. And Tim, I'll come to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bex, and thanks for having us here. It's great to be here with Doug and all of you. So yeah, I'm Tim Shaw. I chair the, I'm not on the Orange County Board of Education. There's another Tim Shaw in the county who serves on that body. So I chair the Orange County Continuum of Care Board. I've been involved in homeless issues since I was 22 years old, which was a long, long time ago. I started my career in direct homeless services with an organization called SPIN, Serving People in Need, which is still around, doing great work. And I used to run the Orange County Homeless Issues Task Force here for years and had the privilege of working with some wonderful folks from the county and in our service provider community way back in the 90s to bring in the first federal dollars that established the continuum of care. Way back, I believe our first allocation was 95, somewhere around there. And been involved and engaged ever since. So Bex, I don't know if you want to talk about what the COC does now or later.
I think now's a great time to share for anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah. Just a quick overview, and then Doug can kind of tell you about the distinction between the County of Orange and the Continuum of Care Board, although they're connected at the hip. So the Continuum of Care Board really is mandated to exist by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. And actually, if you've been around the Continuum of Care Board for a few years, you would know that it really has changed over its lifespan since the mid-90s when it was formed. For most of its existence, it existed to coordinate the federal, what is called the Super Notice of Funding Availability, Super NOFA. And this is a huge federal program that allocates dollars to a variety of local homeless programs. But in order to implement and provide accountability for the use of those federal dollars, each local jurisdiction that gets those dollars forms a Continuum of Care board. And that board is formed from the larger Continuum of Care, which are service provider organizations, housing authorities, and individual members, people all around the community, and they elect the board. So the board for the Continuum of Care is not elected by the general public, it is elected by the Continuum of Care members. We have responsibility for large parts of the system of response to homelessness in Orange County, including the coordinated entry system, the homeless management information system, and we have various committees that work on parts of the system. So we'll talk a little bit more about those because it's actually germane to the conversation here, what those committees are doing with the point in time count data right now. So I won't go into that now. But we do have a lot of great representation on that community care board from across the community, a lot of diverse voices with incredible experience and perspectives, including people with lived experience who are heavily represented on the board and in our committee structure. So that's what we do. And we are not we are contracted or not contracted with, but we have to, every COC board locally chooses what they call an administrative entity and collaborative applicant. early on in this, we wouldn't be here unless back in the 90s we had worked on this, the Orange County Homeless Issues Task Force with the County of Orange. And so the County of Orange from the beginning has been the administrative entity and collaborative applicant with the Continuum of Care board. And that has bounced to different parts of the county. It has been at the healthcare agency, at community services, but now it resides under Doug's shop at the Office of Care Coordination. So our staff really works under Doug's leadership there at the Office of Care Coordination. So that's how we're really connected with the county. So that's a good segue into your introduction, Doug.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Doug Becht. Like Bex and Tim mentioned, I'm the director of the Office of Care Coordination. Our office is located in the county executive office. So from the county side of things, we are really the lead here at the County of Orange for coordinating the efforts countywide, specifically within county government, but also equally as important, partnering with cities and nonprofits to address homelessness across Orange County. And then, as Tim mentioned, very important to this conversation, we are the administrative entity, so to the COC. So essentially, we're the staff that helps execute the vision and goals and charter of the COC. So the point in time count is a COC exercise, and because it's required and it's a COC exercise, our office leads executing the point in time count, and same with the CS system, coordinated entry system. And this is where I think it's really important, because often when anything's sort of associated with the county or our office, people think, okay, this is the Board of Supervisors enacting something, or this is the county doing it because it's a county government operation. But specifically with the point in time count and coordinated entry, two of the most important exercises or aspects of the homeless service system, they're a COC exercise that as the staff, in its simplest terms, of the COC, the county does that as part of our work with the COC. So that's where at times it gets a little blended, but hopefully as forums like this help folks better understand where the work is happening and who's making the key decisions, which obviously lets people know how they could impact the system the most. So.
Thank you so much to both of you for that really, I think, helpful framing for our conversation, providing that insight into the role of the County of Orange, the Office of Care Coordination in particular, and the work of the COC board. And just for the sake of transparency, I'll share that I've been a member of the COC board, serving alongside Tim for the last 4 or 5 years. I think I've lost count now.
I think we're going on 6 now, Bex. We came on.
Okay.
I think, yeah, time flies when you're having fun. Huh?
So 5 or 6 years, I stand corrected. Thank you for that. And with that, I have had the privilege of being a part of the point in time count committees for many, many years here at Orange County. And so, so the point in time count, for anybody who this is maybe new to you, it is a count that it is mandated by HUD. So Department of Housing and Urban Development mandate that this is done. They dictate the time that it happens. It has to happen in the last 10 days of January. And this is the 3rd time that our community has used exactly the same methodology. And that's something that's really important. So we actually now have enough data that we're able to compare 2019, 2022, and 2024 data and information because that same methodology has been used over those years. This last year, or not this last year, it feels like it was last year. This 2024 is flying by. So the count happened January 2024. The results came out in May, and we are now in July. But back in January, there were over 1,250 volunteers that went out into the community, into our 3 regions of the county: the north part of the county, the south part of the county, and the central part of the county. Part of the unsheltered point in time count is also to ask those who are willing to participate in a survey. And so that's where we gather a lot more information. There's really strict criteria around what sort of questions you can ask, how many questions you can ask. And so that's why I know many of us have lots of things that we wish we could gather in the point in time count, but there are limitations and restrictions around the kinds of things that are able to be asked during that survey portion of the count. But what it does provide us with is some really significant information for the work that is happening here. As we talked about last time, the point in time count information shouldn't be looked at in isolation. It is one of many different data sets that we have. And so it's always important that we're coming to it with a critical lens, recognizing that it provides us with a lot of information. It also leads us to have a lot of questions, which is definitely something that Doug and I touched on last time. So hopefully the link has dropped into the chat for the report. You'll be able to pull that up as we go through. We know the big news, the sort of big headline news that came out from this last year was that there was a 28% increase in our overall count number between 2022 and 2024. But when we look at that from 2019, it was only a 7% increase. And so that was one of the things we talked a lot about in the last conversation, was the impact of extra funding and resources that are available during the COVID crisis, and some of the things that shifted and changed between 2022 and 2024 that might have impacted that increase. But Doug, I know we talked about a lot last time. As you've had more time to digest our conversation and sit with the report, I know you've been out and about. Is there anything sort of new that has bubbled up for you from the report?
I don't think there's anything new that's bubbled up, but what continues to come to mind for me is that we have this increase. We have this significant increase, and it needs to be a call to action. As we continue to look at the programs that we've funded, both at the continuum of care, at the county, many of the cities, we see success in these programs. We see people getting housed. We see people accepting services, seeking services. And as we mentioned last time, one of the small data points, that we looked at was how many folks in the two county shelters, Bridges and Yale, are ready for housing, but there's not an opportunity for them. And essentially what we saw was that 72% of people on a given day were ready for to be, did everything they needed to do to get housed, but there was only 1 in 12 of those 72% were connected to housing on that day. So as things like, and we might get into it a little later, but Supreme Court decision that came out, a month ago, the increase in homelessness, the challenges that the state budget has, all of these things make us look closer and closer at our system. And I think it's incredibly important that what these results do is remind us of the work that needs to be done. And it is not a reflection of, people don't take away, oh yeah, these investments we've made have not been successful, because we could take you to the people that have ended their homelessness through these investments. What it is we our system just is being outpaced, and it's a call to action. So yeah, in terms of like a specific data point that, has that we've seen that all of a sudden resonates more. No, I think for us moving forward, the one other one I'll mention is I know our office and the county's interested in looking at the folks that state that they've become homeless for the first time in the last year, which was roughly 48% of the folks that were surveyed. So trying to understand what's going on in this last year that has resulted in them experiencing homelessness, and is there anything we could do about that?
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, absolutely. That number of that percentage of people who've fallen into homelessness for the first time was definitely something that was very jarring about the report, and yeah, really important questions for us to dig in there. Tim, I'm curious from your point of view, when you first read the report, would love to know kind of what jumped out to you, and then as you've had more time to sit with it as well, what's been standing out to you?
Yeah, I'd like to reinforce a couple things that Doug said and then frame a couple of things that stood out to me as well. One thing that I think is really important is I'm going to harken back to something you said because I want to reinforce it, Bex, that we have to be discerning and honest in the actionable insights that we derive from the point in time count, right? I tend to avoid broad, sweeping statements and generalizations based on this data alone. A couple of years ago, we had a point in time count that indicated to us that homelessness had decreased by, I think it was 14%, somewhere around there. And there were people who were, oh, we've succeeded, we've decreased homelessness. And I don't want to be a wet blanket, but I was kind of throwing up a little bit of a caution that I felt like in 2 years, we're going to do this again. And I knew that at that time that we were probably going to see the end of some of the COVID protections, eviction moratoriums. What people don't realize is that the COC board, the county, cities, federal, state government, we were literally putting people in hotels, taking them off the street to get them out of harm's way during the pandemic, feeding them every day, doing those types of things. Tons of programming and dollars were going into that work. I knew that was going to sunset and that we were likely going to see an increase as a result of that. And that's what happened this time. But I avoid making broad sweeping generalizations, as Doug was saying, that, oh, we simply haven't done our work because we've seen a decrease, or when we've seen an increase, or when we've seen a decrease, oh, we've done such a great, the bottom line is that there is an overarching reason why homelessness continues to persist. And it is exemplified in the piece of data, and this is what I want to reinforce, that was the big stick out for me in this point in time count that Doug referenced. We live constantly having to debunk the myth of service resistance, right? We hear all the time, the people don't want help. They won't go into shelters. They won't accept the help if it's offered to them. This is a myth. And the data that we got here kind of puts a lie to that. We tell them all the time, just do what society tells you to do. Go to the shelter, do what you're supposed to do. They did that. In our sheltered homeless count, we found that people in our shelters, over 70% of them did everything we asked them to do to be eligible for housing assistance. We were able to house 1 out of 12 of them, 1 out of 12. So they want the help, they want the housing, we're just not providing it. So the overarching thing that is exacerbating the situation is the inability and the refusal of local jurisdictions to actually create the conditions where we produce affordable housing and permanent supportive housing, that end homelessness. So that's one thing I really wanted to point out. The other thing that really struck out to me I wanted to point out is we do get subpopulation data, from this as well. And it enables us to kind of take a look and connect it to other data that we review in our system improvement and system performance data from our coordinated entry system, our homeless management information system, our partner 211 at United Way. They work on that with us. We're able to kind of take this data and look at subpopulations where we see some overrepresentation. We often see that Black people are overrepresented in the homeless population here in Orange County. Transitional age youth, LGBTQ plus people. So we want to make sure at the Continuum Care Board that we're focusing on making sure that there aren't entrenched biases and inequities in the system. So we've done things like a racial equity assessment of the homeless system that has led to actually substantive changes in what we've done, including the nominating process for the board itself, because representation matters. You're probably going to be more attuned to serving those populations if they have a voice at the table. And so that has, led to things like our Lived Experience Advisory Committee and making sure that our recruitment processes, and they've resulted in the most diverse board that we've ever had at the Continuum of Care now. So we do use the data in those ways. So those were a couple of things that really kind of jump out to me that I kind of laser focus in on from the point in time data.
Absolutely. And I will underscore what both Doug and Tim shared around the unfortunately low number of people who are able to be matched to an opportunity to resolve their housing crisis. So as you heard from this year's point in time count information, when they looked at those 2 shelters, it was 1 in 12 who were being able to be matched to that opportunity. We had looked at coordinated entry system data from last year, and it was a very similar percentage. So this is not an anomaly for 2024. This is a pattern that we've seen over time, that the volume and demand that we have in our system for those opportunities to resolve a homelessness crisis is much, much higher than the opportunities and the resources we have for those permanent housing opportunities, for those rapid rehousing opportunities, for permanent supportive housing, for tenant-based vouchers, for rental assistance programs. We just don't have enough of those for the people who are in need of them. Both of you have been out and about in the community talking about the point in time count. And I'm curious what kinds of questions or comments you've heard. Is there anything that sort of surprised you, or anything that that you want to highlight that's come out from the community about this? Good or bad?
Yeah, I think what I'll say, because I've done a large amount of presentations on this, as one would expect. And so in terms of surprise, I don't think anything surprises me with the point in time count responses at this point. What's interesting is I heard a lot of folks say, hey, listen, I'm not surprised with the increase. I sort of expected the increase. I felt sort of like what Tim had mentioned in his comments. It was an encouraging sign 2 years ago, but there was a lot going on with COVID relief and eviction moratoriums and things to that nature. But I think that the number, I'm not surprised the number's gone up. We did have some cities, that said, and I think this is important. We had some cities say, hey, we were surprised our number either didn't go down or it didn't go down as much as we thought it did, because what we see on our streets is, we feel like we see less folks, and the raw number that you're providing, we take pride in our outreach, we take pride in engaging folks, and it seems like a larger number than what we're used to. And then we had folks that felt like their number was, they were surprised at how large their number was. And I guess what I say to all of this is that sort of what we've mentioned, the point in time count's important, don't get me wrong. But like any census, even though we follow best practices and we're always looking to hone, and improve the point in time count, it's not perfect. So how much you rely on the raw number, specifically if you're looking at it from a city's perspective, can be a little bit dangerous. And then the other thing I'd say is and really haven't talked a ton about it, is a lot of outreach in Orange County is done during the during the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. And we do the point in time count in the late evening and the early morning. And I think that there's something to be said about, there are folks that we're missing day to day because they're not necessarily present during the day, but they're, out on the street experiencing their homelessness during the evening. So, well, I guess to sum it all up, because I could just keep going down this rabbit hole, with people are really interested in this information, which is good. And we like that because it means they're interested in this population. And, so it's encouraging on that end. The thing I always get really sort of hung up on a little bit is when folks overemphasize the number, when it's the end all be all, and they look specifically at one number and they say, there's no way that could be possible. I know this and it can't be. The point in time counts just, it's where its value is seeing a trend over time. And then it's also, I'd argue, complementary to all of the other work that's done over the years, this different reporting on our system that's done that might not be as publicized as the point in time count. And it gives us another perspective of what's going on in our community. And that's why with the first question you asked, which was, is there something else? I said, it's really just about that staggering number, not overanalyzing it, but realizing, hey, there's still a lot of work to be done. So, it's always, it just depends who you're talking to and what their view is. They take numbers different ways, and which can be challenging because a lot of us just, at the end of the day, we just want to help folks, and this is a sign that we still have a lot of help that needs to get done. So.
Yeah, I would jump off something Doug said there because I agree that it's great the interest in it, and there has been. I mean, I talk to people all over the place, and I'm involved in a lot of other things outside of this, and it comes up in conversation, right, with people in spaces in healthcare. It comes up in conversations in, academia and other places where I work. But I hate to be a little bit of a Debbie Downer here, but I wouldn't call it a surprise because I've been around too long to be surprised by it, but I'm consistently disappointed by the extent to which this does not, prompt action or urgency, particularly on the part of, and I'm just going to, say it specifically, city councils, who see this unacceptable number. No matter if there's an increase, decrease, the bottom line is the number's unacceptable. The numbers of people who die on our streets annually is unacceptable. It's a completely unnecessary condition, and we know how to solve it. And the answer and the responsibility, frankly, lies with the city councils here, who need to enact policies that lead to the production of affordable housing, with housing ends homelessness. Permanent supportive housing with wraparound support services ends chronic homelessness. We know this, but we simply can't build it unless we get those projects entitled and unless we have general plans, housing elements, zoning that promotes, and programs and funding that promote the development of that kind of housing. And so I wish that I could be surprised that people took this and it created an urgency to act in that way, act in ways that aren't punitive against homeless people, that don't treat homelessness like a personal failing or a moral condition, but treat it like the economic condition it is, and produce the housing necessary to end homelessness. So I wish that I could be surprised by that. And I remain hopeful. And I will talk a little later as we talk about some other things around some areas of opportunity, now where there is some hope, to actually change some things. So,
yeah, I'll add a little bit to that, and I get. Listen, I don't want my comments to come across as if the point in time count is no reflection on the system that's been created. There is a reflection there, but the frustrating part is when people and whoever it might be, local electeds, community members, use the point in time count as if it's a report card on the funding that has been currently dedicated to the system. It is not that. It is truly a reflection. All it is a reflection of how many people are experiencing homelessness on that night. Now, I think we're all smart enough and we all understand that you could take it a step further to say, okay, there's the 7,200 people experiencing homelessness. What is our community doing about it? And you might have an opinion there, but it's not a direct report card on that. And I think often when people view it like that, and I think it's, this number's gotten, when it gets public like this, and I've worked in other communities, and this number's just as politicized in other communities as it is here, it feels like when the number comes out, whether it goes up or down, that it's that report card on the system, and then that causes, especially local jurisdictions to feel like they have to defend what they've done or things to that nature. And often what comes out of that, taking it one step further, is sort of assumptions that addressing homelessness is done through one silver bullet, or there's one major fracture in the system. Ultimately, we need more housing. There's no doubt about that. And it's a group effort. Even, anyone who's been involved, whether it's creating a shelter, doing an outreach team, or specifically building permanent supportive housing, we get financing from the federal government, state government, local government, city government. Cities are critical in citing it and supporting it. So it's a real community effort. It's challenging when the point in time count comes out and folks say, see, I told you, this isn't working. Let's take steps back. And that's a really dangerous place to go, especially here and now.
Yeah, that's thank you for that. And it reminds me of part of the conversation that we were having last time. One of the attacks that we hear about housing first, and for anybody who doesn't know, housing first is a sort of a philosophical approach to addressing homelessness that says that we can resolve homelessness by making sure somebody gets access to a home and support services at the same time to end their homelessness. And like that's the approach that we need to do. It's a proven national best practice. Tons of research to back up that this is the approach to address homelessness. But what we can sometimes hear is, well, housing first clearly doesn't work because the numbers have gone up. And this is where we dug into this last time, we're gonna dig into it again today. That argument does not work. Housing first is not a homelessness prevention strategy. So if we're concerned about the numbers of people experiencing homelessness going up, we need to be going upstream to prevent people from falling into homelessness. Housing first is what we use to help resolve the housing crisis for people who are experiencing homelessness right now. And so looking at that, like our successes are getting people connected to those resources. Once they're connected to those resources, how long do they stay stably housed for? And we know from the housing inventory counts, from the system analysis reports, we've got so much data showing Orange County does a tremendous job of keeping people housed once their housing crisis is being resolved. Those percentages are at 97, 98%. They are extremely high that people remain housed when we use the housing first approach. So really wanted, again, to highlight, underscore that. Tim, I see you nodding along, so I want to pass the mic to you.
No, I agree with what both of you just said there. I think those are really important points, and housing first only works if we have the housing. So we need to focus on that. I'm going to be a little bit of a broken record all day today because, all of these things, we can look at this data, but until we start doing the effective things rather than the expedient things, we're just not going to make a dent in the issue.
So curious about what has been done so far utilizing the data from this report. Tim, I know there's been the hope of lots of conversations on the COC level. So talk us through, what's the COC doing at the minute?
Yeah, there's two things I would highlight that we're doing, and there's a lot going on besides these two things, but two things in particular I think are pretty important. One is, I mentioned earlier that we have a committee structure, right? And that sounds pretty boring, but it's not. And the committees, that's where a lot of the lively work of the COC happens. And so we have committees around domestic violence, transitional age youth, veterans, housing opportunities committee that most of the housing authorities and housing providers serve on that group. We have a lived experience advisory committee that is very active and involved and engaged. We have a policies, procedures, and standards committee that kind of takes recommendations and looks at what policies and procedures we can change to make the system more effective. And what we did, and a service provider forum, which are all the folks, the frontline workers who are doing this. And one of the things that we did is we charged the other officers on the COC board, Dr. Shantina Sorrells and Nicole Gideon. We charged those committees with scheduling data reflection sessions on the point in time data, where from their unique perspectives that they could take this data and see if they can't derive some actionable insights, again, connected to all of the other sources of data that we use in ways that might help us serve those populations more effectively. So those have been ongoing right now, and I participated in a couple of them. I participated in the one with the Lived Experience Advisory Committee, and it was amazing, amazing feedback. And the hope is that what will well up from that work are some recommendations that we can apply to the system and make the system better, make the system more responsible, make the responsive, make the system more just and equitable. So that's one thing that we're doing. Another thing that we're engaged in right now, and this is something that the general public will have an opportunity to get involved in as we move through the process, is we're engaged in a strategic planning process for the COC board. We've never done that. In the whole history of the Continuum Care Board, there's never been a comprehensive strategic planning process. I mentioned a while back in my introduction, like some changes, the way the COC board has changed, and let me just kind of expound on that a little. Years ago, it was just a pass-through for the federal dollars that came through. That's what it was for most of its existence. But around about 6, 7 years ago, when the state started allocating dollars, they thought, why not, use the continuum of care boards that have already that are already existing in these local communities to allocate those state dollars. So we oversee dollars from the state. And what that's required us to do is develop much more of a discretionary grant-making operation, which is really different than the sort of prescribed way that the HUD dollars come through us. And so that requires a level of community engagement and transparency and policy and process that we really didn't have before. And so a strategic plan before probably wouldn't have been that effective. Now we really need one to guide the priorities, because we have to do a lot of priority setting. So the point in time data will be a key input into the strategic planning process. We've already had those conversations. We have a great consultant that we brought in to help through this process, Aubrey Sittler. And we have a great committee, a really diverse committee that is shepherding this process. And there will be opportunities for people who are listening in on this right now to participate in that process and provide your feedback to us. So those are two ways that we're actually taking and kind of trying to make this data live a little bit and actually breathe and find its way into the way we do our work.
So I'll say on the county side, there's a couple of things. So two direct things that are the wheels are turning and we're actively planning for. One I mentioned earlier is we're in the process of our interest is to focus a study and understand that population, that 48% who fell into homelessness in the last year. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll hopefully be able to talk further about a potential survey that we might do in the coming year that really hones in on understanding how folks are falling into homelessness. Second thing is I know my colleagues over in OC Community Resources, who oversee our Housing and Community Development Department and our Housing Authority, they've always taken the lead from the county's perspective on developing permanent supportive housing. They also obviously run a really successful voucher program that helps prevent people from falling into homelessness. But one of the things we've been talking about, we really haven't had a chance to, we're still in the planning process and outreach process, and many of you on this maybe reached out, but we're interested in bringing together stakeholders throughout the county, specifically cities and developers, and really take an honest look at what are some of the hurdles. We know many of them at standing up housing, specifically permanent supportive housing, knowing that it's a community effort, we each play different roles. Are there areas where each of us can sort of commit to, okay, in my corner and with my responsibility, I'm going to work on improving my portion of the system and have each of those. So we're, like I said, we're still in the planning phases of that, but we're really excited because I think one of the challenges we talked about, or I think I took from our remarks, I know is that often another thing is that homelessness, depending on the conversation, is blamed on one group or another. And especially when numbers go up, people get a little defensive. And what we want to make sure we do is create an atmosphere that says, okay, how do we as a collective community come together and, talk about how each one of us can contribute to system improvement, specifically around housing for this exercise, and really make some impactful change. Some very specific things that are worth noting is just today, the Family Care Center, overseen by HomeAid, which is the largest family shelter here in Orange County, reopened or had its reopening ribbon cutting. And the county has specifically several supervisors on our board, Chairman Wagner, Vice Chair Chafee, have provided a significant amount of discretionary funds to help ensure that Family Care Center stays open. Not to mention the COC, which is funded for several years, help fund the Family Care Center. Supervisor Chafee, Supervisor Sarmiento have both invested money in prevention programs and rental assistance programs. So Supervisor Doe is looking to help some of the cities in his district that have had the highest increase in homelessness, specifically Fountain Valley and potentially Westminster. So Supervisor Foley, has always has different initiatives going on down in the South. So, what I'm proud of, is that our board has really continued to lean in. They've used and seen these results and realized that more has to be done. And at least in these first couple of months have continued to show what they've shown previously, which is that they're going to invest where they can.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, there has been not just a flurry of activity since the results have come out, but I would say it's an ongoing, designation of resources that now with the point in time count information, as we were hearing from Tim and Doug, is able to be directed in better ways. And so that is part of the advantage of having the point in time count data alongside the other data sets that we have. One of the questions that came in when people were signing up for this was around, should we be doing the point in time count more often? And we know that some communities choose to do this count every year. We know the HUD mandates that it to be done every 2 years. And so curious to hear from each of you, from your vantage points, your thoughts on that. And Doug, I'll start with you.
Okay, so yeah, my previous life, I came from a community that did it every year, and I see the real value in that. As I mentioned, the point in time count, one of the most impactful takeaways from it is the trend. So looking at it year to year or every other year. So in theory, I would love to do one every year. The practical challenges that we have is the resources. Not only the resources to, for my staff and at the moment CityNet, who has our contract, it does a really great job being the project lead in order to get to fund our efforts in all the administrative stuff. But every single city contributes a ton of resources, whether it's law enforcement resources, outreach resources, facilities for the night of the count and the mornings of the count. The Board of Supervisors make sure that county facilities are open. it's a really heavy lift. And you know, we're sort of stuck in this position here where, like with so many things, is you know, with scarce resources, um, is it worth it? And worth it's a strong term, because what we did last year as well here at the Office of Care Coordination was we were able, without doing the point in time count, we were able to focus on doing an unsheltered survey that surveyed 20% of the unsheltered population based on the 2022 point in time count. And that gave us a lot of really good information that the point in time count, because of its very specific, the specific questions that HUG requires, doesn't allow us to ask during the point in time count. So we used it as an opportunity to ask other questions. And, you know, one of the things that came out of it, and it was the support to our continual message that folks are, they are very much interested in services, and they are very much willing to, you know, accept services and are interested in ending their homelessness. So it provided us a real tool. You know, if we are able to do the survey around folks that have become homeless in the last year, that'd probably, you know, that's going to honestly take up a lot of time and energy to do that. And we really want to understand that specific phenomenon. It's, you know, we always say, oh, the point in time count gets really good data. Can we look deeper into it? Not that one survey completes the deeper look, but it's part of the deeper look, to say the least. So, and then the last thing I'll say is the data is helpful. Don't get me wrong in the point in time count, but I think we all realize, and we all see that the numbers are going up, and most importantly, there's still a need for us to invest. So thinking about what would we learn, what are we going to learn next year doing the count, that's that much more impactful than if we waited another year. We know we need to invest. We know there's a challenge out here. Can we use that time to learn something a little different and a little bit that will help us even more better, and, you know, with my perfect English, you know, focus our limited resources on. So.
Thanks,
I agree
Doug.
with Doug. I agree. I would not be in favor of doing it every year. I think that better resources are better spent on, like, I know it was just posted in the chat, you know, the survey, great information. You know, back in the day, we did demographic profiles of homeless people in Orange County that kind of changed the conversation. United Way has done great, you know, data with UCI around the homeless cost study and the impacts of affordable housing on crime and property values and things. I just think that we get a data set that is useful, as Doug has mentioned, out of point in time count. We have all these other data sets. The ginning up of resources to do a point in time count on an annual basis, I just wouldn't support the allocation of resources for that. But I am for more of these targeted types of research projects that help us understand the issue in a better way.
Yeah, and as Tim mentioned, the link to we had a community chat about the survey that Doug and Tim were referencing, and we've dropped that link in the chat box. And just to let you know, there's been a lot of resources that have gone into that chat box. We're going to send those all to you by email, so don't feel the need to be furiously copying and pasting all of those links. We will send a follow-up email to everybody who was here with those links and some additional information and ways that you can get connected as a follow-up to this. So let's see, where do we want to go? We've got 12 minutes left. So actually, I will ask you, how can people get more involved in addressing homelessness? It's been a lot of the things that I'm seeing in the Q&A box while we're chatting here is, how can people get more involved? How can they get more involved at a local level with their city, perhaps with the Board of Supervisors? And Tim, I'm going to come to you for this one.
Yeah, so there's a couple things I would point out here. First of all, right now in your cities, I'm going to make a pitch for advocacy here and the work Michael does over there at the Housing Champions Advocacy Network, the Kennedy Commission, People for Housing OC, Elizabeth Hansberg and her group, what they do. Um, right now, literally right now, cities are developing the implementation plans for their housing elements. Every year, cities are part of what's called a regional housing needs assessment, regional housing needs allocation. It's an 8-year cycle, and they have to plan for how they're going to meet the housing needs in their community. And I know United Way has been heavily involved in the advocacy effort around that, and these other groups I mentioned. I've been heavily involved in my own city here in Irvine throughout the entire process of developing the housing element. But right now, cities are doing the granular work to put the policies in place, to do the zoning changes that need to happen in order to meet their regional housing needs allocation. You have opportunities to go and make sure that your city councils, your planning commissions, that they are doing the right things right now. I know in my city, I live in Irvine, and Irvine has put forward, the Irvine staff, I think, did a fantastic job and put forward a very aggressive housing plan. Irvine has the largest arena number in the county by a long shot. And the plan that the staff put together for the general plan around housing was fantastic. And we're making progress, and our housing advocacy group has been kind of shepherding that through and advocating for it every step of the way. So there's an opportunity for you to be involved in your city, right? To get involved in that. You don't have to be an expert. I will tell you, go to the trainings that Michael does on how to advocate effectively. All those types of things are there for you to do. So that's a real tangible way to really hit on the best solution that we have to this is housing, to the production of housing. If we don't get these policies in place, what the cities do right now is going to determine whether or not Orange County as a total is serious about meeting its housing needs and addressing homelessness in a serious and effective way. So that's one way that I would say that you can get involved. The other thing that I would say, and being involved like in the strategic planning process with us, we're a public body. So you can come to every one of our meetings. And one thing I always say about the Continuum of Care Board is we're one of the only places that has money, has authority, responsibility, right? Where everybody in the community, you can be a person who is currently homeless. You can be a person who is formerly homeless. You can be a person who is housing insecure. You can be a person who lives in Newport Coast. Whatever, you can come and you can have that. We have public comment. Most of our committees are also public, where you can come and you can make public comment. So as we go through the strategic planning process, I hope you'll sign up for to receive the notices, and maybe we can put a link in the chat on where to go to do that, to sign up to receive the notices of when all those meetings are taking place. And as opposed to some public bodies, I won't name names, but some public bodies that try to squelch community input, we welcome it. We literally changed policies and addressed issues that the public has brought to us in public comments. So we're a place that we welcome that. And so you can come and you can listen in and educate yourself, go listen in on the committee meetings, make comment, all of those types of things, and have some input in that way.
Fabulous. Thank you, Tim. And we'll make sure that the link to the information about the COC strategic plan and vision and all of that is included. So we'll make that nice and easy for everybody to access all of that information. There's going to be a lot of links coming your way, guys. Doug, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, and it feels like an easy answer, but to piggyback off of Tim, the advocacy piece is so important. For someone who sits at a lot of I sit at every board of supervisors meeting. I attend many other council meetings. There's plenty of advocates these days on the no thank you side of things, and it's important to hear from them. Don't get me wrong, but the support side really needs it, especially these days. When you have grants passed come out, the ruling by the Supreme Court around abilities for local jurisdictions to address encampments. And when you have a state executive order or a governor's executive order by Governor Newsom this last week around addressing encampments, what is in the media is always sort of the top line piece of it. And often that top line piece really sort of sways it in one way or the other, whether it's negative or positive. And I think with grants pass and the governor's executive order, public discussion these days feels at times that people are the voice of, we need to enforce, we need to do things that we know are not successful strategies in addressing homelessness, gets louder and louder, which is why folks that are fully educated understand the system and are advocates of the system are really helpful to provide that critical voice. And it's not just about a rubber stamp support, we just need to do more and more, but it's about educating folks. Advocacy not only advocates for a specific cause, but it also, here around homelessness, advocacy also helps educate people around that. And statewide, we're in a budget deficit. So like always, but especially now, funding decisions, there's a lot of prioritization that has to go on, a lot of decision making. It's really important that our local elected leaders understand that homelessness is a top priority, and that helping people end their homelessness helps us all. So I know it's something that's been heard before, but there's a reason why we keep saying that, because it is so incredibly powerful. So.
Yeah. What I would say, and while we're on the grants pass decision and this executive order, a couple of points I would make is, that the grants pass decision is concerning and complicating, right? And I understand, I'm not one who's Pollyanna and sitting up here not understanding the community frustration with encampments, right? They're not good for anybody, right? But we simply can't abide this notion or this fantasy that these encampments appeared out of nowhere, right? There are reasons that they exist, and we don't need to belabor the point. We've talked about many of them. We're not producing the housing necessary to end homelessness. And so when we don't do that, we end up with things like encampment, and then we end up in situations. I talk with a lot of police chiefs and sheriff's deputies, and I've worked with them a lot on this stuff. And none of them want to be the first responder to homelessness. It's not really what they're chartered to do, and nor do we want that, right? We want appropriate trauma-informed care that can provide a pathway to services and housing for people, right? It's not a law enforcement issue, and the more society treats it like a law enforcement issue, the more we avoid the real solutions to it. And so what I hope can happen here, and not trying to be just overly negative about it, I think I'll just personally say, I think it's the wrong decision. I think the Supreme Court got it wrong. I'm troubled by the governor's executive decision. I don't know that that's going to have the effect that I think he's hoping, that the cities will take positive action or local jurisdictions will take positive actions. And I think what I hope is that this will cause a coming together of people to really kind of reimagine the role of law enforcement in homelessness, right? In a way, the homeless cost study that United Way and UCI did pointed out that that's what drives up the cost. We literally spend more money to keep people homeless in this county than it would cost to simply provide them housing. And it's because of this situation that we have, right? So I hope that it will cause a good dialogue. And I know from the Continuum Care Board, that's something we've talked about a lot. How can we work with law enforcement? How can we work with local jurisdictions to think more creatively beyond just the kind of binary thinking? You got to either encampments or no encampments, right? Where can we find ways that we can work together to create effective solutions, not just ones that make us all feel better in the moment and just move the problem around and further exacerbate the jail to street pipeline? We can't do that.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys taking a moment to talk about those two topics. We have 1 minute left, so I'm going to lightning round you a couple of questions. So just off the top of your head, immediately what comes to mind? What's the main thing that somebody needs to know about solving homelessness? Tim.
Housing ends homelessness. And housing with
Doug.
supportive services ends chronic homelessness. Thank you.
Yeah, we need more housing.
If you have the power to change one thing instantly, what would it be, Doug?
I think people's understanding of how to address homelessness.
Tim.
I would instill the courage and conviction in local elected officials to make the right decisions and enact the right policies to produce more housing. That's what.
And lastly, what keeps you inspired in this work, Doug?
I'd say the good work by a lot of my colleagues and seeing people end their homelessness and knowing that it's an achievable goal.
Tim.
You know, we have a pastor, Jason Phillips, who serves on our COC board, and he reads the names of all of our homeless neighbors and friends who we've lost on the street over the last month. And it's a large number. And I always consider that every data point that we read, that represents a life, a person who has hopes and dreams and aspirations and is deserving of love and respect and a life free of this kind of misery. So that's what keeps me inspired. And then I would echo what Doug said, my colleagues, people like you, Bex and Michael and Doug, and all my great friends and colleagues and mentors who do this work on the front lines every single day, just really inspired by their commitment.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Doug, Tim, for being here, for your wisdom, your insight. Thank you to everybody who sent us questions in advance, who tuned in today. This will go up on our YouTube channel, so feel free to send that link to people, to anybody who wasn't able to join us. Right now, you can see a little poll has appeared on there. These are really helpful for us. It won't take you very long if you can just click, click, click. We find the insight really useful. Doug, Tim, thank you again. I look forward to seeing many of our attendees at our next community chat. Thanks, everyone.